Amen. Well, we're going to pick back up from Mark chapter 8, where we've been, and we're talking about bread, folks. All right, so Mark 8, and, just to recap a little bit, Jesus had fed the 5,000, then he fed the 4,000, and now here we are afterwards, where Jesus had asked the disciples, or he had told them of his plan, right? Remember I told you how Jesus reveals his plan. He tells them in Mark 8, chapter 8, verse 2, he tells them he had compassion on the crowd, and he wanted to feed them because they'd been with him 3 days. And so he reveals his plan. This is how many times the Lord works with us. He reveals a plan to us, something he wants to do, and then usually we respond. Sometimes we respond like the disciples did in verse 4. And his disciples answered him, "How can one feed these people with no bread here in this desolate place?" Now, they had already experienced the feeding of the 5,000. They'd already seen other miracles, right? But now they're here. Jesus reveals his plan, right? What he wants to do that day. He wants to feed hungry people that have been following him around for 3 days. And the disciples kind of take a step back from that, even though they had seen miracles already and already seen this specific type of miracle happen already. They didn't say, "How can we?" What did they say? "How can one?" In other words, how can you, Jesus, how can you feed these people out here in this desolate place, right? And verse 5, he says, and he asked them, "Well, then how many loaves do you have?" Right? Not how many loaves do we have. Right? He didn't include himself in that. So what Jesus is doing is he's revealing his plan, and then he's inviting participation from people. Amen? And people, us, say I'm a people, sometimes we don't have the kind of faith that we need to enter into agreement with something like this, because we all say, "Does Jesus heal today?" And everybody goes, "Amen." All right, if you got pain in your body, get up here. And nobody moves. So what are we saying? Jesus can heal today, just not me. Why not me? We disqualify ourselves. Why do we disqualify ourselves? We're not worthy. What else? No faith. It's easy to believe an abstract thought than it is to believe for you personally, right? Maybe you don't want to get embarrassed. What if I go up there and nothing happens, right? All kinds of things, right? So Jesus reveals the plan. The disciples kind of pull back from that plan like, "Yeah, so Jesus, that's awesome that you want to feed all these people. How are you going to do it?" And he says, "Thank you for asking me that wonderful question. How many loaves of bread do you have?" Oh, man, Now Jesus is getting in my business now, right? So they say 7, and he directed the crowd to sit down on the ground, and he took the 7 loaves, and having given thanks, he broke them, and he gave them to the disciples. So what happened? He reveals his plan. The disciples pull back from the plan. Jesus pulls them right back on in by saying, "How many loaves do you have?" Jesus takes the loaves, tells everyone to sit down. He blesses the loaves. Then he breaks the loaves. And then he gives the broken loaves back to the disciples. So did they lose any bread? No. They've got the same bread, 7 loaves, except they're all broken. Okay, that's important. Remember that. Okay. We'll get there. All right. So he gives it back to them, and then, and there was some fish. And having blessed them, he blesses it, right? And he said to them also that these also should be set before them. So they're going to feed them the fish and the loaves. And they ate and were satisfied. Amen. So in other words, everyone had plenty enough, right? And then it says, and they took up the broken pieces left over in how many? 7 baskets full. Leftovers. They had 7 baskets full of leftovers. And there were about 4,000 people. He sent them away, and immediately they got in a boat with his disciples, and they went to the district of Dalmanutha. I always have trouble saying that one. All right. So then he goes on, and we're going to pick up here in just a minute. He talks about the leaven of the Pharisees, and then in verse 14, we were here last week, verse 14. Now, they had forgotten to bring bread, and they had only one loaf with them. Where? In the boat. So they're in the boat. They only had one loaf of bread with them, right? Everyone say one loaf of bread. Where were they? In the boat. And he cautioned them, saying, watch out, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. And they began discussing with one another. Who was they? The disciples in the boat. The fact that they had one loaf. They had no bread. Wait a minute. Go back. Go back one more. Now they had forgotten to bring bread, and they had only one loaf with them in the boat. Now go forward to. And they began discussing with one another the fact that they had one loaf. Wait a minute, go back to. And they had forgotten to bring, and how many loaves did they have? Go forward to, in the what? In the boat. And they began discussing with one another the fact that they had no bread. Okay? They were in a boat, so, and there was some fishermen, so they could have caught fish. But, see, here's the thing. So we have talked about this. Now, we don't really know what happened, but we have to surmise that one of about three possibilities took place. Either they ate the loaf, okay, or they hid the loaf. Somebody had a loaf of bread and was like, Thomas would be like, I'm not sharing this with anybody, Shock. I got me a little cake with some chocolate icing on top, and it's all for me. It's mine, right? Right? Or they disregarded the one loaf as nothing. Okay? Not enough to do anything with. How many of us feel like that sometimes? That little old poor old me, I don't have nothing to offer Jesus, and here we are with something to offer. All he needs is one crumb, because all someone had to say was like, hey guys, wait a minute, hold on. Remember when we were out in that one place on the hillside, and there was like 5,000 people or something like that, and Jesus was like, how are we going to feed these people? Oh, we could go to a town and buy some stuff. And he's like, no, it's too far. We don't have money, whatever. Okay, so, but hey, there's a little kid, and he's got a lunch. He brought his lunch. He brought 5 loaves and 2 fish. We could use that. And Jesus could multiply it. You remember that, guys? Yeah. Oh, and just the other day, maybe it was yesterday, maybe it was the day before. What day was it? I don't know. I didn't look it up. Anyway, but it was a day or two before. And there was 4,000 people, and we had 7 loaves. Remember, Jesus was like, I want to feed all these people. And we were like, good luck, Jesus. And he's like, no, come back. How many loaves do you have? And they said, we got 7 loaves, Jesus. But, these are our loaves, right? No. We had 7 loaves. And Jesus took 7 loaves, and he fed 4,000 people. He took it from us. He gave thanks and blessed it. Then he broke it. And then he gave it all back to us. And then we fed all those people. You remember? And then afterwards, guys, there were 7 baskets full of broken little pieces left over that we brought with us. Remember? So guys, like, which one of the group was the technical guy, doing all the calculations, Maybe it was Peter, maybe it was Matthew. I don't know. He was a tax collector. I guess must have ate them. Yeah. Ah. It's a different word for basket. A basket the size of a man. No, I didn't know this. Oh, see that? Did y'all get that? Okay, come up here because we got to get it on the microphone for those at home. Come say that again. Becky, you got something to add to that? So come, you got to come over here.
The smaller basket, the 12 that are left over after feeding the 5,000, is basically a lunch pail, a lunch basket. I had Emily hold hers up. She's got some at home that are about yay big, about the size of a picnic basket maybe. There were 12 of those left over. Okay, after they feed the 4,000, they have baskets left. A different word in Greek. I have it written down, but at home in my notes. It's a basket that the same type of basket that in Acts chapter 9 that they lowered Paul over the wall in. A basket big enough to fit a man. Now, Paul wasn't necessarily a big man, but he was probably about as wide as he was tall. Probably. So, if you watch Indiana Jones, you see Raiders of the Lost Ark when Marion's lost in the market and she's in a basket. Think of that. That's probably about the size of basket that was left. Now, Pastor, what did they do with that bread when they got back on the boat?
Hold on, she's got to go.
I really didn't have anything other than that the word means hamper. The big basket means hamper. So think of a hamper big enough to hold clothes back then, because they didn't have little bitty hampers because it took them a while to wash all their clothes. So
Maybe, but they don't tell us what they did with them, so we'll have to figure that out. But I got an idea. I do have an idea about that. Okay, we'll get there in a week or two. We'll get there. But so here we are. They have decided that either they ate their bread, they disregarded their bread as nothing, or they lost it, or they hit it, or whatever, right? Maybe it got wet, maybe it fell over. But here's the thing. Percentage-wise, they took 7 loaves. How big were these loaves? If the baskets were this big, how big was the bread, right? So we have to presume that the loaf was just an average-sized loaf of bread, right? 7 loaves fed 4,000 people. 5 loaves fed 5,000 people. They had 1 loaf in the boat for how many people? 13, right? 13. So percentage-wise, they had more to start with in the boat than they did either of the other 2 times, okay? So they're like, if, you could just hear these guys in the back. We're like, Peter and Andrew would be like, so we got 1 loaf. If Jesus would just make it into 3, we'll be all right. Right? O ye of little faith. Right? We're negotiating about miracles now, Like, Lord, all I need is to just double this one thing. That's all I need, Lord. But see, he wants abundance, and he wants leftovers for a reason. Okay, we're going to get there. We're going to get there. The leftover, the broken bread is for the masses, you see. But that's later, okay? So the leftovers it was given to the disciples to distribute afterwards, okay? We're going to get there some other time. But just know that, okay? So they were discussing the fact that they had no bread. Now, think of this. If I had witnessed twice Jesus multiplying bread, and now we're in a boat in the middle of, the water, and we're going, oh man, did you buy the bread? I didn't buy the bread. I thought you brought the bread. No, I told him to buy the bread. And nobody brought the bread, and they've got 1 loaf, or again, Thomas is over there like, what y'all talking about? Crumbs everywhere, right? What y'all talking about? Like, we're discussing the fact that we have no bread, right? What if he was eating it, right? But think about this. If there were one crumb, if there was one piece left somewhere in somebody's pocket, in somebody's knapsack, right? It's somewhere. Someone with some faith could have said, Jesus, multiply this, right? But no. Look what happened. Let's keep going. They were discussing with one another the fact that they had no bread. Now we're in verse 17. And Jesus, aware of this, how big was this boat? Right? Right? So they're talking about it, so they could have been whispering, right? They'd be like, did you buy the bread? No. Did you buy it? Not me. I bought it last week. Then Jesus took it, and he multiplied it. It's your turn to buy the bread, right? But Jesus, aware of this, so Jesus caught wind of what was going on. He said to them, why are you discussing the fact that you have no bread? Okay, first question. Second question, do you not yet perceive or understand? Third question, are your hearts hardened? Fourth question, having eyes to see, do you not see? Fifth question, and having ears to hear, do you not hear? Sixth question, and do you not remember? Remember what? The next part, 19. When I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many baskets full of broken pieces did you take up? And they said, 12. And the 7 for the 4,000, how many baskets full of broken pieces did you take up? And they said to him, 7. And then the 7th question, and he said to them, do you not yet understand? He asked them 7 things, right? What did he ask them? Why are you discussing the fact you have no bread? Do you not yet perceive or understand? Are your hearts hardened? You have eyes, but you can't see. You have ears, but you don't hear. Don't you remember? And then, don't you understand? He asked it again, right? So this is where I want to spend a little bit of time today, okay? A couple more minutes. Oh, my gosh, it's 11:54. I got 6 minutes, okay? Ready? 6 minutes. Here we go. All right. Intro's over, right? So let me tell you this from last week. The disciples were lacking some spiritual maturity in about 3 ways. Number 1, they assumed a poverty mindset, okay? That's number 1. They chose to hide the fact that they had seed, okay? They were like the widow of Zarephath could have been. You know, she just wants to eat her cake and die, okay? So they could have assumed that posture. Like, we only got 1 loaf. If we give it to Jesus, he's going to take it from us. But someone could have said, but he's going to multiply it. So it's going to be okay. And the last 2 times, there was leftovers. It was actually more left over than we started with. So, hey, what's wrong with that, right? No, they reverted back to an old way of thinking, okay? A poverty mind that comes from that slave from Galatians 4, you know? When a child is young, he is no more than a slave, even though he is heir of all, right? They took on that posture. Okay, they decided, even though they were with the King of Kings, even though they were with the Master, even though they were walking with the one who multiplies bread, even though they were walking with the one who is the bread of life, right? They said, I don't know what we're going to do because we forgot to buy bread, right? Right? They took what they had and chose to disregard it as anything valuable to the master, when he had already shown them, I like to do things with bread. I like to multiply bread. I like to take the little that you have and show you something by multiplying it and breaking it and blessing it, so that you can take the brokenness with you everywhere you go and give it to whoever you come across so you can sustain them. Okay? But here they are, they revert to a way of thinking, a poverty mind, a slavery mind, and they chose to hide the fact that they had some seed for Jesus to bless, break, and distribute, and then have leftover. They chose then to just eat their seed and die. The one thing they had to work with, they either lost, ate, or disregarded, right? Second thing, they missed the adoption of sonship. and they fell back into an orphan spirit. They looked at their own resources and abilities, even though the master was present and demonstrating his ability as an example for them to do likewise. As an example for them, right? Jesus told them at the Great Commission, greater things than these shall you do, right? So, he's inviting us into this lifestyle of miracles. He's inviting us into these things, and he's trying to show them something by blessing the bread. And he's saying, I can take the little that you have if you'll just sow it, and I'll multiply it, and I'll feed the masses with it. I will bless the little that you have, but you got to give it to him. Okay? But see, when we operate by this orphan spirit, we say, there's not enough. I've got just enough for me and my child that we can eat and we can die. Right? But just like Elijah the prophet told the widow, make me a cake first. And if you do, the Lord will sustain you through the famine. Right? But see, we take and we say, no, I kind of like my orphan spirit. I kind of like being, just being like, hey, my four and no more, I kind of like just barely getting by. It's all I need, right? All I want is a little cabin in glory, just a little thing for me on the side. That's all we care about, right? It's all we're looking for. But Jesus, he's trying to show them that there is more to this walk. There's more to this life, because there is brokenness that needs to happen in our lives so that we can feed people the brokenness of Christ. Right? Who remembers the two travelers on the road to Emmaus? And Jesus walked with them. And they said, didn't our hearts burn within us when we walked and talked along the road? They didn't know it was him until when? Who remembers? Until he broke bread. Until he broke bread. When it says that he was revealed to them in the breaking of the bread. See, in the brokenness, in the breaking of the bread, Jesus is then revealed. But we want our loaf. I paid for this. No one's touching it. No one's getting any of it. I'm keeping it right here. Ain't nobody getting this last. It's the last one I got. It's all I got. It's all I got. Right? It's my bread. Right, Chuck? Right? It's mine. But see, when you're a son or a daughter of the king, you know that he owns the cattle of 1,000 hills. You know that he is the multiplier. You know that he is Jehovah Jireh, right? Our provider. You know that his first miracle, he turned water into wine. That's pretty cool. So he does stuff with food. We know that. So why are we worried about food? Right? After the resurrection, Jesus walks through the wall and he asks, hey, you guys got anything to eat? So we know he likes to eat. Okay? At my house, my kids know that I like to eat. So they never have to worry on whether or not we're going to have dinner, because they know Dad likes to eat. He's going to fix something, right? Remember the guys that went fishing after the resurrection? And who's on the shore? Jesus. What's he doing? Cooking breakfast, baby. So it's okay. Jesus likes to eat. This is a revelation. So when you got one loaf of bread and he's like, hey, what are we going to do with that one loaf of bread you got, guys? What y'all doing? Can I see that? We'll be like, no, Jesus. Why do you want to see my loaf of bread, Jesus? What are you going to do with it? He's going to eat it. No, he's not. He loves you. And he wants to take what you have and multiply it. He wants to bless it. He wants to give thanks for you. And then he breaks you. And he says, now go give this out. And if you give it out, I'll give you more and more and more and more and more of this. Do you see this? You see this? This is what he's doing. But look at the posture they took on. Last thing, they missed the purpose. They missed the purpose because he asked them twice, do you not understand? Guys, don't you get it? They missed purpose. We are in the kingdom. Therefore, we must think like the kingdom and think like the king, right? They failed to see beyond their circumstance. We only got one loaf of bread. They failed to see beyond the circumstance, to recognize the important spiritual lesson that Jesus was teaching them, okay, of which carried global, historical, and social implications affecting the formation and development of the early church. At that moment, they were just not getting it. They eventually get a handle on it. But Jesus asked them a lot of times. He got frustrated with them, you know. Yeah. How much more was I put up with you guys, you know? So, look at it. Why are you discussing? So there's two postures, man's way and God's way, right? Why are you discussing and why are your hearts hardened? Okay? That's question 1 and question 3, right? Why are you discussing? This is verse 17. And why are your hearts hardened? Discussing is reasoning, okay? It's the hardness of the heart, okay? It's reasoning in the mind, okay? Why are you discussing? Why are you sitting here knocking this thing back and forth with one another? You know, talking about it, talking it to death, we say, right? Yeah. And then the other thing is the heart, okay? The heart and the mind are intertwined, okay? The heart and the mind sometimes are synonymous, right? We say your heart, we mean your mind, right? And vice versa, right? So they're interconnected. But let's look at it right real quick. In Mark 12:30, Jesus tells them that to love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your strength, and your mind. Okay, so he separates there. So in there we see the heart and the mind, right? So the heart is the word cardia. What word do we know about that? Cardiac, cardia. Okay, heart, right? It means heart, cardia, right? It means your thoughts or feelings, okay? What you think, right? But specifically your feelings, okay? How many's got feelings, right? How many times do you say, you hurt my feelings, right? You hurt them. You hurt my heart. Like that little kid, he says, you poked my heart, right? That's what happened for him, okay? So he got poked in the heart, okay? So that's the heart. That's on the surface, thoughts or your feelings. But it's really specifically so that we can differentiate. Let's talk about feelings, okay? We can feel a certain way. It may not be from God. It may be a sense or a feeling, spiritual thing that we're feeling. But normally when we say feelings, we're talking about our emotions, right? We feel happy, we feel sad, we feel angry, we feel betrayed, we feel rejected, whatever, right? All those things. But we can also feel joy and peace and strength, right? All those good things, right? Okay? So if the heart, he's saying, he's basically saying the heart and the mind are intertwined. Why are you discussing, okay? Why are you reasoning in your mind, right? And why is your heart hardened, okay? Two different things. So he's saying, why are you feeling this way, is what he's trying to say in question 1. Why are you feeling, what are they feeling? They could have felt like failures. Oh, man, I forgot to buy bread. I let everyone down. Or they could have been scared, like in the parable of the talent. You know, he says, I knew that you were an austere man, reaping where you have not sown, right? And he said, so I decided to just bury this in the ground. One other one says he folded up in a handkerchief, right? And so that when you came, I could give it back to you. And he calls him a wicked servant, right? But there was a fear factor in there, you see. I was worried about what the master might say, and he might be disappointed. So there's a feeling, right? Worry. I don't want him to be angry with me. So what could have been going on? They're discussing the fact that they had no bread. Now, what are they discussing? It's the mind, right? Reasoning in the mind. So if they're discussing, their mind is working, and their feelings and their emotions are at play, and they're like, I'm not telling him. You go tell him. No way, man. I'm not telling him because I forgot to do so-and-so last time, and I'm scared what he might say to me, right? People are scared sometimes to go to the Lord and just say, Lord, I messed up. So that's one way. But the mind, watch this. That's the heart, the feelings, right? But the mind, the deep thoughts, to exercise the imagination and your understanding. So it goes beyond the simple thinking of the mind, but it gets into the deep thought. You ever get into a rabbit trail and you just go down the hole of something and you begin to, your imagination goes absolutely insane. And you think, well, if this happened, and you usually starts with like, what did they mean by that? And you start to think, and you start to reason, and you start to discuss, sometimes with yourself, right? And it goes into deep thought. This is no longer just your feelings. This is now where you get into dangerous territory because your imagination, Bible says to take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. Why is that? Because thoughts, if they run away, it's like a runaway freight train. They just go wherever they want to go. And there ain't no stopping it. Because once it gets going, the momentum of that thing goes to a place that you're not going to want to be. Okay? Because imaginations have to be taken captive. And that's what he's talking about here. He's saying, why are you discussing the fact that you haven't read? In other words, why are you in deep thought and allowing your imagination to take over with the fact, quote unquote, that you have no bread? 2 verses before, they had a loaf. Between that verse and this verse, something happened to the bread, okay? All right? But they're sitting there exercising their imagination and going into deep thought about why and what they're going to do about this bread when the answer was very simple. Hey, let's just get the guy who blessed the 5 loaves and the guy who blessed the 2 loaves. He's the Son of God. Let's just bring our loaf of bread to him and have him bless it and multiply it like he did the other 2 times. Simple. But no. We're going to go into deep thought and imagination and get our feelings involved in this whole thing. See, this is the way of carnality. This is the way of the soul, okay? We have to allow our spirit to govern our soul and our flesh if we're going to be kingdom people, amen? All right? So watch this, the 1 Corinthians 2:14. This is in the Amplified, so you don't have to put it up there. It says, but the natural unbelieving man does not accept the things, the teachings and the revelations of the Spirit of God. You hear that? The natural unbelieving man does not accept the things, the teachings and revelations of the Spirit of God. For they are foolish, absurd, and illogical to him. He is incapable of understanding them because they are spiritually discerned and appreciated. And he is unqualified to judge spiritual matters. Wow. So when you think with your emotions, when you think with your feelings, and you're trying to make spiritual decisions with your emotional state, okay, with your deep thought and imaginations that the word says for us to take captive, when you try to do that, you're like this. You're the natural unbelieving man that cannot accept the teaching and revelation of the Spirit of God because it's foolish, absurd, and illogical to your mind. It makes no sense, right? Let me give Jesus the last loaf of bread we have. Makes no sense in the natural. But see, if we're spiritual, it says that he's incapable of understanding it because they are spiritually discerned and appreciated. Wow, they're spiritually discerned and appreciated, okay? So in order to walk out life in the Spirit, we have to be in the Spirit. We have to be Spirit. We have to be led by the Spirit, amen? But see, when we choose to divert back and discuss and harden our heart, close our spiritual eyes, close our spiritual ears, and not see, that's what Jesus is asking. He's like, guys, you were with me when I did these miracles. How many baskets were left over each time? You were there. You were there. Why are you discussing? Why are your feelings getting involved all of a sudden? Why is your imaginations getting involved Why is your soul meddling in spiritual matters? Okay? Why are you governed by your flesh and your soul, right? Flesh and soul, because we're talking about food, eating, okay? Why? Don't you yet perceive and understand? That's the real way. So reasoning and the hardness of heart is man's way. It's allowing the feelings and emotions to get in the way of making spiritual decisions. But he's saying, why don't you perceive and why don't you understand? Okay? Right? So perceive means to exercise your mind, to observe, comprehend, and understand. We're talking from a spiritual aspect, right? And then to understand is another word. It means to put together mentally, like assembling a piece of puzzles, okay? To comprehend or to become wise. It comes from another word, which meaning not only to put together, but listen to this, not only put together, but to be together. It means a union or an association, a companionship, a process, or a possession. We are a people of his own possession, right? It means completeness. It means that if we perceive and understand, then we will exercise our mind in a way where we will observe what is truth, right? We'll comprehend it and we'll understand it. But then we'll also we'll get all the pieces of the puzzle and we'll be able to discern what God is doing. And then we will be in agreement, in union with him. We'll walk in companionship with him. We'll go through the process with him, and we'll become the people of his possession, and he will complete us through this process. Two ways, man's way or God's way. Which one are we going to choose? Amen? Amen. See, in Mark 6:52, he says, "For they did not understand about the loaves, but their hearts were hardened." That was the first time. Okay, they did not understand about the loaves. Jesus is teaching them something about the loaves. And he's trying to show them. He asks them 7 questions here. Why are you trying to do it man's way when I've shown you the way of the Spirit? You can't live in the kingdom. You can't be in the kingdom living the way of the flesh. See? And they were thinking this way. And it's not working. And Jesus is saying, don't you understand? Don't you see what I'm doing? I want to serve broken bread to the masses, and I need your bread. I need you. I need you to understand. I need you to come into your completeness. I need you to come into companionship and association with me in this. He's inviting our participation in his plans. That's why he revealed both times that he fed masses of people. He told them, I want to feed them and I need your help. That's what he's doing. Amen? So let's stand. We're going to pray.